Daisy, before we begin today's episode, I have a very important question. Has your phone gone missing again today?
I knew you were going to bring that up. I had absolutely no doubt.
To be fair, opportunities like this don't happen every day. You spent 10 minutes searching for a phone that was already in your hand.
In my defense, I was distracted and thinking about several things at once.
That's exactly what concerns me. If an object can disappear while you're holding it, we're dealing with a serious situation.
Thank you for your support during this difficult time.
You're welcome. The funny thing is that almost everyone has a story like that.
That's true. The moment I told friends what happened, they started sharing their own embarrassing stories.
Which reminds me of my favorite mistake. I once spent 20 minutes searching an entire parking lot for my car before remembering that I'd arrived with a friend in his car.
I still think that's worse than my phone story.
It definitely is. I'm not even going to argue.
The interesting thing is that these stories are funny now, but they weren't funny when they happened.
That's true for many mistakes in life. The lesson often arrives long before the humor does.
And that's exactly what we're talking about today.
Not small, everyday mistakes,
Bigger life mistakes.
the kind that teach us something important about success, happiness, and personal growth.
Looking back, most of the important lessons I've learned came from situations where something went wrong.
Same here. Success feels wonderful, but mistakes are often better teachers.
The key is learning from them.
Which brings us to our first mistake.
Waiting for the perfect moment instead of getting started. Before the break, we talked about waiting for the perfect moment and why that's one of the most common mistakes people make.
And I think it's common because it sounds so reasonable. Nobody says, I'm avoiding my goal. They say, I'm waiting until the timing is better.
That's exactly what makes it dangerous. It feels responsible, even when it's holding you back.
I remember going through a phase where I wanted to learn a new skill. I was genuinely excited about it and convinced it would be valuable.
Let me guess, you immediately started researching everything about it,
That's exactly what happened. I watched videos, read articles, listened to experts, and compared different learning methods.
which sounds productive on the surface.
It did. Every evening, I felt like I had accomplished something because I'd learned a new concept.
But learning about something and doing something aren't always the same thing.
That's the lesson I eventually learned. After months of preparation, I realized I still had very little practical experience.
How long did it take before that realization finally arrived?
Long enough that I'm not proud of the answer. It was close to a year.
That's actually longer than I expected.
It surprised me too. A few weeks of delay can quietly become a few months, and a few months can become a year before you notice.
I think many people experience that with goals they genuinely care about.
Absolutely. The more important the goal feels, the easier it becomes to convince yourself that you need more preparation.
Looking back now, do you think preparation was really the problem?
No, the real problem was fear. Preparation was simply the disguise fear was wearing.
That's a powerful observation because fear rarely introduces itself honestly.
Exactly. Fear doesn't usually say, I'm afraid to fail. Instead, it says, maybe next month would be a better time.
Or, I should do a little more research first.
Or, I'll start when I feel more confident.
That last one is particularly dangerous because confidence usually comes after action.
That's one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned. I spent years believing confidence came first.
Many people believe that.
Then I noticed something interesting. The people I admired weren't necessarily confident when they started. They became confident because they started.
That's such an important distinction. Confidence isn't usually a requirement for action.
In many cases, it's the reward for action.
Think about learning English. Nobody becomes confident before speaking.
Confidence develops through conversations, mistakes, corrections, and experience.
The same thing applies to almost every skill in life.
Which means waiting for confidence can become a trap. You're waiting for something that only arrives after you begin.
That's why small steps matter so much.
Exactly. People often imagine success as one giant decision,
In reality, it's usually a series of small decisions repeated consistently.
one workout,
One conversation,
one page written.
one lesson completed,
Those actions don't look impressive on a single day.
but they become impressive when they're repeated over months and years.
Listeners, we'd like you to think about something. What's one goal you've been postponing for a long time?
Maybe it's learning a skill, improving your health, starting a project, or pursuing an opportunity you've been thinking about for years.
Instead of asking when you're going to finish it, ask yourself what's the smallest action you could take this week?
Not the perfect action,
Not the biggest action,
just the next action.
because progress doesn't usually begin with certainty.
It begins with movement.
And sometimes the biggest mistake isn't failing.
Sometimes the biggest mistake is never giving yourself the chance to succeed.
Speaking of mistakes, the next one affects millions of people every single day.
And modern technology has made it harder than ever to avoid.
In part 3, we're going to talk about comparison and why somebody else's success should never become a reason to question your own progress.
Before the break, we talked about waiting for the perfect moment and how easy it is to convince ourselves that preparation is the same thing as progress.
And now we're moving to a mistake that affects people almost every day, especially in a world where we're constantly connected to other people's lives.
We're talking about comparison.
More specifically, comparing your life to someone else's life and then feeling disappointed by the result.
The strange thing is that comparison often begins with good intentions. We see somebody accomplish something impressive, and we feel inspired.
Then something subtle happens. Inspiration slowly turns into self-doubt.
Exactly. Instead of saying, "That's amazing," we start asking, "Why haven't I done that yet?"
I remember a period when several people around me seemed to be accomplishing major goals at the same time. One friend received a promotion, another bought a house, and another launched a successful business.
That's the kind of situation that can make anyone question their own progress.
It definitely affected me. For a while, I stopped appreciating what was going well in my own life because I became focused on what everybody else was doing.
That's the trap. Nothing in your life actually becomes worse, but your attention moves away from your own journey.
Exactly. Looking back, the problem wasn't my situation. The problem was my perspective.
I think many listeners can relate to that. We sometimes forget how far we've come because we're busy looking at someone who's further ahead.
And there will always be somebody further ahead in something.
That's an important point. No matter how successful you become, there will always be someone richer, more experienced, more skilled, or more accomplished in some area.
Which means comparison is a game that can never really be won.
Social media makes this even harder because we're constantly seeing carefully selected moments from other people's lives.
We see vacation photos, celebrations, achievements, awards, and exciting announcements.
We rarely see the setbacks, disappointments, mistakes, and difficult moments that happened before those successes.
It's like watching the highlights from somebody else's life and comparing them to your regular Tuesday afternoon.
That's actually a great way to describe it.
Thank you. Every now and then, I accidentally say something intelligent.
Don't worry, it happens to all of us occasionally.
I appreciate the encouragement.
Let me ask you something. What finally helped you stop comparing yourself so much?
A friend asked me a simple question. He said, if you could meet the version of yourself from 5 years ago, what would that person be proud of today?
That's a wonderful question.
It really made me think. Instead of focusing on what I hadn't achieved yet, I started noticing the progress I had already made.
That's the comparison that actually helps. Comparing yourself with your past self is productive. Comparing yourself with everyone else usually isn't.
Exactly. Maybe you're healthier than you used to be.
Maybe you're more confident than you used to be.
Maybe you've learned a valuable skill or overcome a challenge that once seemed impossible.
Those things matter, even if they don't make dramatic headlines.
In fact, they matter a lot because real growth is usually gradual.
Most of the important improvements in life happen slowly. That's why they're easy to overlook.
Listeners, here's something we'd like you to think about. If you compare yourself with the person you were 1 year ago, what has improved?
Maybe you've become more disciplined, more patient, more knowledgeable, or more resilient.
Take a moment to recognize that progress because growth deserves appreciation.
And speaking of growth, that leads directly into our next mistake.
That's right. In the next part, we're going to talk about comfort zones.
Because growth and comfort rarely travel together for very long.
And some of the biggest opportunities in life are waiting just outside the places where we feel safest.
Before the break, we talked about comparison and how easy it is to lose sight of our own progress when we're constantly looking at everyone else's journey.
And the interesting thing is that comparison often creates another problem. We become so focused on what other people are doing that we stop taking risks ourselves.
Which brings us to another major life mistake: staying inside your comfort zone for too long.
The comfort zone is a strange place because it feels safe. Nothing unexpected happens there. And that's exactly why people stay.
The problem is that most of the things we want in life tend to exist outside that zone.
Think about learning a language. The first conversation feels uncomfortable.
Think about changing jobs. The first few months feel uncomfortable.
Think about starting a business, giving a presentation, or moving to a new city. Discomfort shows up everywhere growth is happening.
I remember the first major presentation I ever had to give. I spent days worrying about it.
What worried you the most?
Honestly, I was afraid of making mistakes in front of everyone. I imagined forgetting important points, losing my train of thought, and looking completely unprepared.
That's interesting, because most people listening have probably experienced something similar.
The funny thing is that none of those disasters happened. The presentation wasn't perfect, but it went well enough.
That's usually how reality works. Our imagination often creates a much scarier version of events than what actually happens.
Looking back, I realized the nervous feeling wasn't telling me to stop. It was simply telling me that I cared.
That's such an important lesson. Fear isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's simply a sign that something matters.
I think many people assume confident people don't feel fear.
I used to think that too. Then I started talking to people I admired and discovered they felt nervous all the time.
The difference was that they acted anyway.
Exactly. Courage isn't having no fear. Courage is moving forward even when fear comes along for the ride.
That's probably why so many opportunities are missed. People wait for the fear to disappear before they begin.
Meanwhile, the people making progress are often just as nervous. They've simply accepted that fear is part of the process.
Another thing I've noticed is that avoiding challenges makes them seem bigger over time.
That's very true. A difficult conversation today becomes an even more difficult conversation 6 months from now.
A skill you want to learn today feels much more intimidating after years of postponing it.
The challenge grows larger in your imagination, while your confidence becomes smaller.
Which is why small action matters so much.
People often think growth requires a dramatic change. Most of the time, it doesn't.
One conversation,
One application,
one class.
one decision to try.
Those actions look tiny on a single day.
But when repeated over time, they completely change the direction of a life.
Let me ask you something. If you could give listeners one piece of advice about comfort zones, what would it be?
I would tell them not to focus on becoming fearless. Focus on becoming willing.
I really like that.
You don't need enough courage for the whole journey. You only need enough courage for the next step.
That's much more manageable.
Exactly. Most achievements are built one uncomfortable step at a time.
And every time you take one of those steps, your comfort zone expands a little.
Which means the things that once seemed frightening eventually become normal.
That's how growth works. Today's challenge becomes tomorrow's routine.
And speaking of important life lessons, the next mistake might be the one people regret the most when they look back on their lives.
We're going to talk about time, relationships, and why people often realize too late what actually matters.
Because some opportunities come back, but time never does.
Before the break, we talked about comfort zones and how growth usually begins when we're willing to be uncomfortable for a while.
And now we're moving to what might be the most important mistake in today's entire episode.
We're talking about time.
More specifically, we're talking about the mistake of assuming we'll always have more of it.
That's a lesson people often learn much later than they would like.
I remember having a conversation with an older gentleman several years ago. I expected him to talk about money, career success, and achievement.
That's usually what people imagine when they think about life advice.
Exactly. Instead, he spent most of the conversation talking about people, memories, and moments.
That's interesting. What stood out to you most?
He said something very simple. He said that many of the moments he missed while chasing bigger goals turned out to be the moments he wished he could experience again.
That's powerful, because most of those moments probably seemed ordinary at the time.
That's exactly what he explained. Family dinners, conversations with friends, weekends with loved ones, and simple experiences didn't seem important while they were happening.
Yet years later, those ordinary moments became priceless memories.
That conversation changed how I think about success.
In what way?
It made me realize that success isn't just about achievement. It's also about relationships, experiences, health, and the people we share our lives with.
I completely agree. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming important relationships can survive indefinitely without attention.
That's a great point. People often say they'll call someone next week, visit next month, or reconnect later.
Then life becomes busy.
Weeks become months.
Months become years.
Suddenly they're wondering where all the time went.
I've noticed something similar with health.
That's another area where people often delay important decisions.
People say they'll start exercising later, sleeping better later, or taking better care of themselves later.
The problem is that later has a habit of arriving much faster than expected.
That's one reason I think consistency is more valuable than intensity.
I completely agree. Small, healthy choices, repeated for years, usually create far bigger results than occasional bursts of motivation.
The same principle applies to relationships.
Absolutely. Most strong relationships aren't built during dramatic moments.
They're built through conversations, shared experiences, and consistent effort over time.
You know what I've noticed?
What have you noticed?
People spend years chasing things they believe will make them happy. Yet happiness often comes from things they already have.
That's such an important observation.
People say, I'll be happy when I get promoted.
Or, I'll be happy when I earn more money.
Or, I'll be happy when I achieve this goal.
Then they reach the goal and immediately create another one.
Exactly. Happiness keeps moving further into the future.
That's why learning to appreciate ordinary days is so important.
Some of the best moments in life aren't dramatic at all.
A meaningful conversation,
A family gathering,
a meal with friends.
a quiet evening with people you care about.
Those moments rarely appear in success stories.
Yet, they're often the moments people miss most when looking back.
Listeners, we'd like you to think about someone important in your life right now.
Maybe it's a friend, family member, mentor, or someone you haven't spoken to for a while.
Is there a conversation you've been postponing?
Is there a message you've been meaning to send?
If somebody immediately came to mind, maybe that's not an accident.
Maybe it's a reminder that some things deserve attention today instead of someday.
Because unlike money, lost time is something we can't earn back.
And that leads perfectly into our final section
We're going to bring all these lessons together.
and answer one important question.
What's the difference between a mistake that becomes a regret?
And a mistake that becomes wisdom?
Before the break, we talked about time, relationships, and why so many people only realize the value of certain moments after those moments are gone.
And that brings us to a question I've been thinking about throughout this entire episode. What actually makes a mistake valuable?
That's a great question because nobody enjoys making mistakes. If mistakes automatically made us wiser, life would be much simpler.
Exactly. The mistake itself isn't the valuable part. The lesson is the valuable part.
I completely agree. Two people can make exactly the same mistake and have completely different futures because of it.
One person reflects, learns, and grows. The other person repeats the same pattern again and again.
That's why self-reflection matters so much. Experience alone doesn't create wisdom. Understanding the experience creates wisdom.
Looking back, I think I spent too many years trying to avoid mistakes entirely.
That's a very common mindset.
The problem is that avoiding every mistake usually means avoiding every challenge, too.
That's true, because growth and uncertainty tend to arrive together.
If today's conversation has taught me anything, it's that many of the lessons we're most grateful for came from situations we'd never choose voluntarily.
I feel exactly the same way. Some of the experiences that seemed frustrating, embarrassing, or disappointing at the time turned out to be incredibly valuable later.
Which is why I think one of the most important life skills is learning how to recover from mistakes.
Not how to avoid every mistake.
Exactly. Recovery matters more than perfection.
Let me ask you something. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would tell my younger self to stop worrying so much about looking inexperienced.
That's a good one.
I wasted a lot of energy worrying about whether people would think I was good enough. I should have spent that energy learning, practicing, and improving instead.
I think many listeners will relate to that.
What advice would you give your younger self?
I would probably say this: appreciate ordinary moments more than you currently do.
That's beautiful, because ordinary moments become extraordinary memories later.
Exactly. Many of life's best memories don't announce themselves when they're happening.
They're just ordinary days that become meaningful when we look back.
So let's quickly review the biggest lessons from today's conversation.
Lesson number 1, stop waiting for the perfect moment, because it probably doesn't exist.
Lesson number 2, confidence usually follows action rather than leading it.
Lesson number 3, comparing your life to everybody else's life is a game without a winner.
Lesson number 4, growth usually begins just outside your comfort zone.
Lesson number 5, invest time in relationships, experiences, and the people who matter most.
And lesson number 6, mistakes become wisdom when you're willing to learn from them.
We'd also like to leave you with a simple challenge.
Think about one mistake from your past that still bothers you occasionally.
Then ask yourself one question. What valuable lesson came from that experience?
You might discover that something you once viewed as a failure actually helped shape who you are today.
And that change in perspective can be incredibly powerful.
Before we finish, we'd love to hear from you.
What mistake taught you one of the most important lessons in your life?
Try answering in English in the comments. Don't worry about making language mistakes.
After an episode like this, being afraid of mistakes would be a little ironic.
That's very true.
One final question, Daisy. Have you checked your phone recently?
I knew this was coming. Yes, I checked before we started the ending, and I can confirm that the phone is not missing.
That's wonderful progress. Personal growth in action.
Thank you for your continued support during my recovery.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for spending part of your day with us.
We hope today's episode reminds you that mistakes are not evidence of failure.
Very often, they're evidence that you're trying, learning, and growing.
Keep learning.
Keep growing.
Keep taking those small steps forward.
And remember that perfection isn't the goal.
Progress is the goal.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Goodbye, everyone.
And please make sure your phone isn't already in your hand before you start looking for it.
Some lessons deserve to be remembered forever.